Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachariya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivadhatari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashto Tarasata Śrīmad His Divine Grace Savai Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder-Acharya Save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashto Tarasata Śrīmad His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Nama Charja Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Premjaka Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadad Hare Sri Sadhguru Bhaktivedanta Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gogovana Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shiv Dhamma Dhamma Ki Navdip Mayapur Dhamma Ki Purushtam Chetra Jagadpuri Dhamma Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanandi. Oh, glory to some bodies. 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 Lord, Sri Sri Guru and Sri Ganga. Oh, glory to Sri Prabhupada. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So there was no purport covered yesterday? Huh? Yeah, a little. I was kind of expecting that read to a purport. Okay. Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuta Yudhistirat Prativindya Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Arjunach Shuta Kirtis Tu Arjunach Shuta Kirtis Tu Arjunach Shuta Kirtis Tu Shatanikas tu Nakuri Shatanikas tu Nakuri Shatanikas tu Nakuri Arjuna Shuta Kitistu Shatanikas tu Nakuri Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Arjuna Shuta Kirtistu Shatanikas tu Nakuri Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuta Seno Vrikodarat Arjuna Shutakitistu Shatanikastu Nakuri. Vaishnavas? Yudhistirat Prativindya Shuddhaseno Vikodara Yudhistirat. From Maharaj Yudhisthira. Prativindhya. A son named Prativindhya. Shrutasena. Shrutasena. Vrikodarat. Begotten by Bhima. You know what Vrikodarat means? Vrikodara? Huh? What does Udara mean? Udara pasta avegam. What does Udara mean? Belly. And Vrika means a wolf. It means he had a belly like a wolf. He was always eating. Arjunat. From Arjuna. Shrutakirti. A son named Shrutakirti. Two, indeed. Shatanika. A son named Shatanika. Two, indeed. Nakuli of Nakula. From Yudhisthira came a son named Prativindhya. From Bhima, a son named Shrutasena. From Arjuna, a son named Shrutakirti. And from Nakula, a son named Shatanika. Sahadeva Suto Rajan Shrutakarma Tatapare Yudhisthira tu Poravyam Devalota Gadot Kacha Bhimasena Didimbayan Kalyam Savagatastata Sahadeva Sahotram tu Vijaya Sutta Parvati. O king, the son of Sahadev was Shrutakarma. Furthermore, Yudhisthira and his brothers begot other sons in other wives. So these first 5 sons were the sons they all had too? Draupadi, very good. And then they also had other wives. Draupadi was like a common wife, a very, very unusual story. She was performing tapasya to get a son. And then to Lord Shiva, she was performing a different tapasya to Lord Shiva. And then finally Lord Shiva appeared to her and said, what do you want? He said, I want a son, I want a son, I want a son, I want a son, I want a son. 5 times she said it. So, okay, you'll have 5 sons by, 5 different people. So this is what happened. It's kind of interesting the way it came out, because she said, well, I wanted a husband 5 times. That's right, I want a husband 5 times. And then she wound up with 5 husbands. And she was shocked because she thought this was very irreligious. And then it was explained later on, I think Narad Muni may have explained it, in the court, how this was perfectly okay. Because of this benediction by Lord Shiva, but also in the past it had happened that others had more than one husband. But unusual, but yeah, again, completely religious. O king, the son of Sahadeva was Shrutakarma. Furthermore, Yudhisthira and his brothers begot other sons in other wives. Yudhisthira begot a son named Devika through the womb of Puravi, and Bhimsen got a son named Gatakoch. What does Gatakoch mean? He had a head that was bald like a pot. Huh? That means bald-headed, basically. Through his wife, Hidimba. Another interesting story, how he got the wife of Hidimba. He was fighting that Rakshasa called Hidimba. And yeah, there's quite a few, because there's quite a few times that the Pandavas, when they were in exile, they were in a spot of bother, so to speak. And Kunti always would send Bhimsen to resolve the problem. So at this point they were staying in the house of a Brahmana. And there was an interesting situation, because there was a small village, and what would happen was every month that one person from the village had to be sacrificed to satisfy this Rakshasa. And so the house of that they were staying in, then all the boys were out hunting, but Bhimsen was there taking care. And then Kunti heard that the residents of the household, the mother, father, the daughter, and the son, were crying. And she was quite concerned about that. Well, here we are, we're powerful Kshatriyas, and our hosts are crying like this, so I have to do something. So she inquired from them what had happened, or what was happening. And they revealed this story how this Rakshasa, Hidimba, was terrorizing the village. And actually, Rakshasas are not very attractive-looking personalities. I remember one time I was in St. Petersburg in Russia, and we went to this place called a Natural History Museum, and they had they had things from all around the world, but they actually had a form of a Rakshasa there, which they'd got from Indonesia somewhere. And it was just like described in the Bhagavatam, coppery red hair, bulging eyes, the head was quite large, the chest was huge, really fearsome looking creatures, and the hair was just like all over the place. Anyhow, so they told the story to Kunti about how the village was terrorized by this Rakshasa, Hidimba. And what would happen was every month, one family would have to give one of their members for this Rakshasa to eat, along with a cartload of vegetables and other things. And so, funny story, this time it was their turn. And so they were all lamenting because, they had to give someone, and the daughter was suggesting that she could go. The father was saying, "No, I'll do it." But they're saying, "But how will we live without you? You're the maintainer of the family," and they're all volunteering to do it. And then Kunti said, "No, I'll send my son." "But you're our guest. You can't send your son." "Don't worry, he won't be eaten by the Rakshasa." And so what happened? Yudhishthira was quite surprised that Kunti was sending Bhima to be eaten by this Rakshasa, but Kunti said, "No, I know that this Rakshasa will not hurt Bhima because he's so strong." She explained to Kunti that when he was a child, I got frightened and I dropped him, and he fell on a rock and he broke the rock. So I know he's kind of like, he's quite strong, and that he can't be hurt very easily. So then what happened was Bhima, he goes off to the meeting place with this cartload of food, and he's sitting there waiting for the Rakshasa, and he's hungry, so he starts to eat all the food. And then the Rakshasa turns up, and he's really outraged. This person who is, and Bhima's got his back to the Rakshasa, he couldn't care less, And the Rakshasa comes running up behind Bhima, and with both hands he smashes him on the back as hard as he could. Bhima just keeps eating and throws this out and eats this and eats that. And the Rakshasa becomes so enraged. Who is this person that he's not frightened of me and he's ignoring me like this? And so anyhow, finally when Bhima had finished eating everything in this whole cart of food, this is Vrikada, we just eat huge amounts. And so then when he stopped, when he finished eating, he turned around to have a fight with the Rakshasa. And it was a ferocious fight. They were uprooting trees and, pulling all the branches off trees and smashing each other with trees. And finally, it got to the point where Bhimsen just pulverized him, just beat him to death completely with his bare hands, and just completely destroyed him. And at one point, because what had happened was that previously Bhima had met Hidimbi. I think it says Hidimba here, but I think her name was Hidimbi. Well, there's another name for her. But she became attached to Bhimsen, and they actually wound up getting betrothed. And so Hidimba, the Rakshasa, he was really upset with his sister. He felt that she had betrayed him. But anyhow, so later on, what happened was that they went traveling together for a while, and she became impregnated by Bhima, and then as a result, Ghatotkacha was born. And Ghatotkacha later, during the Battle of Kurukshetra, he came and he fought on the side of the Pandavas. And Ghatotkacha was very, very powerful, and he had many Rakshasa astras. Very, very fearful astras. He could rain blood and pus and all sorts of things from the sky, mountains and things like that. And at one point, I think it was Karna, he had this astra, it was like a Shatanika dart or something like that. I can't remember the detail, but he had a really, really powerful astra that he was saving for Arjuna, because he knew this astra could kill Arjuna, and that was his mission, was to kill Arjuna. And Ghatotkacha, he was fighting so powerfully, he was destroying the whole army. And Duryodhana was really fearful that the army would be destroyed, so he approached, I think it was Karna, might have been, I think this was after Bhishma Dev had become incapacitated. And so, Ghatotkacha was up in the sky, and he was raining all these mystic illusions down on the army, and the army was running, and they were practically just about to defeat it. So this dart was thrown at Ghatotkacha to kill him, and the dart pierced his chest. But amazingly, as he was just fighting ferociously, and he was just destroying the army completely, and because he was there to protect his uncles and his father. And then as this dart pierced his chest, he expanded his body hugely. It became like, he had all these different mystic powers, and expanded his body so large, and just fell down on the battlefield, and he killed hundreds of thousands of warriors just by falling on the battlefield. So we see how he was really devoted to his uncles, and he even gave up his life fighting for his uncles. And he was actually glorified, he's been glorified in the scriptures as one of the heroes of the Battle of Kurukshetra, even though he was in the body of a Rakshasa, because he was so devoted to his devotee uncles. So it's a very, very amazing story. So, Yudhishthira begot a son named Devika through the womb of Pauravi, and Bhimsen begot a son named Ghatotkacha through his wife Hidimba, and a son named Sarvagata through his wife Kali. Similarly, Sahadev had a son named Suhotra through his wife Vijay, who was the daughter of the king of the mountains. And the daughter of the king of the mountains is Parvati, born from Parvata. And I'm not sure that through it's likely a different Parvati from the one that married Shiva. I wouldn't think that it would be the same Parvati. Karena matyan makulo naramitram tatarjuna iravantam olupyam vai sutayam babruvahanam manipura pateyo sopi tatputra putrika sutta. Nakula begot a son named Namitra through his wife named Karenumati. Similarly, Arjuna begot a son named Iravan through his wife known as Ulupi, the daughter of the Nagas, and a son named Babruvahan by the womb of the princess of Manipur. Babruvahan became the adopted son of the king of Manipur. So, when Arjuna, because there was because they had a common wife, Draupadi, then the Pandavas had an arrangement that when Draupadi was in the private chambers of any of them, that the other brothers wouldn't go in there. And if they did do that, then they would have to go on pilgrimage for a year as a sort of a penance, a repentance for that. So what happened one time is that someone had come to the kingdom. I think their cows were being stolen or something like that. And someone had come to the Pandavas and approached Arjuna. You have to help me. I was a Brahmin, I think. My cows are being stolen. And so Arjuna, he immediately went and, because all the weapons were stored in Yudhishthira's rooms. And so he immediately went in and got his weapon, because he was sworn to defend the citizens. That's the business of a king. They take care of the citizens, and even at risk of their own inconvenience, they'll take care of the citizens. Not like we see these days. They don't take care of the citizens at all. They just extract taxes and torment the citizens. But anyway, so what he did is he went in and he got the weapons and he went and rescued the cows and brought the cows back, etc. And then when he returned, Yudhisthira was no longer with Draupadi, and he announced that he was going to go on pilgrimage for 1 year. And what had happened was Yudhisthira, he said, no, you shouldn't go on pilgrimage. You were doing your duty. He said, no, we've taken a vow, and we have to honor this vow amongst the brothers, that if we come into the chambers when we're with our wife, then we have to go on pilgrimage for a year. So he did that. And during this time, this is when he met these other ladies and married them and impregnated them. Because it was not uncommon for a Kshatriya, at least in that day and age, even up until a few hundred years ago, it was not uncommon for Kshatriyas to have many wives. And you can see there's different kings. There's so many interesting history books you can get in India about these various Kshatriyas and their opulence. And even up to the time of the British Raj, to a large extent, disempowered all these Kshatriyas. They took away their wealth, they took away their kingdoms, and kind of like cut it down to a very token kind of a kingdom. Because they just wanted to subjugate the Indian population. So they tried their best to disempower people and just to cripple the whole civilization. And they did a pretty good job of it. So at this time, Arjuna met Ulupi. And also, after the Battle of Kurukshetra, there was another really interesting story, how Arjuna was just traveling around after the Battle of Kurukshetra, and he came to this kingdom of the Nagas, which is Nagaland. It's up in the northeast area, above Bengal and that sort of thing. So just off there's that sort of area off to the northeast. So Nagaland's up there, and also Manipur is a little bit more to the west. And so he's up there, and he was challenged by his son and to a battle, because that was normal when a Kshatriya came. Either you would accept the Kshatriya into the kingdom or you challenge him. So he challenged him, and he actually killed him. Iravan killed Arjuna. And then Ulupi came out, and she was lamenting, but again, I've forgotten all the detail of it. But then Arjuna was brought back to life by the mystic potency of the Nagas. And apparently there was some sort of, again, I can't remember the detail of it, but there was some kind of thing that Arjuna had done where he had to be killed. But then he was brought back to life, which is quite interesting how these personalities had all these different mystic powers where they could do things like that, to bring people back to life and stuff. These days, it's very kind of gross. They put these electric things on you, they give you a jolt and try to bring you back to life. And often what happens, I can't remember, because I don't know if anyone here ever watches movies, but sometimes you see in movies how people die for several minutes and they're finally brought back to life. But medically, if you die for that long, you wind up with permanent brain damage and damage to different organs and stuff like that. So it's all quite fanciful, this sort of stuff. But in this situation, we see Arjuna, he was dead for quite some time. But he was brought back to life with no harm at all. But modern, they can't do that. Yeah. So, anyhow, next verse. Yeah, and so also what happened was with the princess of Manipur is the king of Manipur, he gave his daughter to Arjuna as his wife on the condition that any son born of that marriage, the first son born of that marriage, then the king of Manipur would adopt that son, because he didn't have an heir to the throne, so that king then later became the king of Manipur. Purport: it is to be understood that Parvati is the daughter of the king of the very, very old mountainous country known as the Manipur state. 5,000 years ago, therefore, when the Pandavas ruled, Manipur existed, as did its king. Therefore, this kingdom is a very old aristocratic Vaishnava kingdom. If this Vaishnava kingdom is organized as a Vaishnava state, this revitalization will be a great success, because for 5,000 years this state has maintained its identity. If the Vaishnava spirit is revived there, it will be a wonderful place, renowned throughout the entire world. Manipuri Vaishnavas are very famous in Vaishnava society. In Vrindavan and Navadvip, there are many temples constructed by the king of Manipur. Some of our devotees belong to the Manipur state. Prabhupada would obviously be talking about what's his name? Huh? Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. Yeah, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, who passed away a few years ago. The Krishna consciousness movement, therefore, can be well spread in the state of Manipur by the cooperative efforts of the Krishna conscious devotees. So Manipur also has quite a history of Vaishnavism, as we can see even back from the times of Krishna and Arjuna, that it was a Vaishnava state. It's a very mountainous region, and you see that even within their art, dance and things like that, the Krishna's pastimes are very, very prevalent. I remember when I was in Poland many years ago, we used to have these Manipuri Rasa Leela dancers come every year to do the dance. They have those big hoop skirts and things like that. And it's very, very impressive, but the whole dance is focusing around Krishna's pastimes and his various leelas, especially the Rasa Leela. But it's very, very nice that their art, etc., is all focused around Krishna. And then even we see, like 500 years ago, Narottam Das Thakur, when those various saints, when they came from Vrindavan under the tutelage of Jiva Goswami, that it was Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shamananda, I think. Yeah? They came from Vrindavan to the eastern side of India, and they were preaching in various areas. But Narottam Das Thakur, he went to Manipur, and he was preaching in that area there. And this style of kirtan that they do now is the style that was developed by Narottam Das Thakur. So it's quite. And I remember that Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, when he led kirtan, this is the style of kirtan he would lead. It has a particular name, but I can't remember what the name is. But this style of kirtan is quite well known in that part of the world, and that's the style of kirtan he followed. And very, very nice. And as Prabhupada's saying here, because it's a Vaishnava kingdom, and they have maintained their Vaishnava identity for 5,000 years, if they take to the process of Krishna consciousness in an organized way, then this can become a very, very influential state in the world. Prabhupada also said something similar in relation to Mauritius, because you see in Mauritius is quite in many ways, quite a religious place. Probably not as much now as it was when Srila Prabhupada was here, but still you see when you go to Mauritius, everywhere you go there's temples. They're not always temples of Vishnu, but everywhere you go there's temples. Even like you drive through the cane fields, and in the midst of the cane fields you'll see these little temples where they're worshipping various devatas and things like that. So it's a largely Hindu population there, and at some level or another they're engaged in some kind of worship. And they've got quite a few, ISKCON has quite a few temples there now, small and large temples, and it's slowly expanding. And Prabhupada also said that Mauritius could become the first Vaishnava kingdom. He actually said this because he met the president or prime minister, whatever it is, of the country, and he said that Mauritius could become the first Vaishnava kingdom. Obviously, it means that if we push Krishna consciousness, that this could easily become a Vaishnava kingdom because of the piety of people there. And there are many places like that where you go in the world where people are quite pious, and it just takes for the right stimulus or the right catalyst, and they will take to Krishna consciousness. Other places you go to, people are very impious, and it's very, very difficult to spread Krishna consciousness. But you go to places like Italy, for instance, people are very pious in Italy. They've got such a background of religiosity there. Everywhere you go in Italy, there's these amazing churches, cathedrals. When I was there last time, we went into Bergamo, which is near to the Villaggio Hare Krishna. And then on top of, they have this hill in Bergamo, and on top of the hill of Bergamo, there are churches and cathedrals, and there's another thing they call them, I can't remember, just everywhere. And you go in and you look at these places, and you can see there's such devotion is there, like all these beautiful artwork and the depictions of the various pastimes, if you like, of great spiritual personalities of Jesus Christ, And you see that within Christianity. I mean, obviously it's died off to a larger extent, but historically you can see there was great devotion there, and kingdoms were based around the devotion to God, because this is actually the natural situation for the living entity. This dharma, or serving God, is the natural situation. But unfortunately what's happened is just like we see that Krishna talks to Arjuna in the 4th chapter, he talks about, but in course of time, the succession, the saintly kingdoms, the succession was lost. And so the same thing has happened in Christianity. I've been reading a little bit lately about, there was a king of Jerusalem called Baldwin IV. And he's quite an extraordinary personality. He became the king when he was, I think, 11 years old. About your age. He became the king of Jerusalem. And he wasn't just like some wimpy kid. He was a great equestrian, a very good horse rider, but also he was quite an accomplished warrior. Just like we see, it talks here about Arjuna's son. What was his son's name, the son of Subhadra? Abhimanyu, 16 years old, quite an accomplished warrior. So this Baldwin, he at one point the Saracens, who were led by a monarch called Salah-ad-Din, a very, very powerful warrior at that time, a great conqueror. They were attacking, they crossed the River Jordan, and they were going to try to conquer Jerusalem. And so Baldwin, he amassed his soldiers. The Saracen army was significantly greater, but still Baldwin had quite an army. And they had this relic from Jesus Christ called the True Cross. So apparently it was a segment of the cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on. And so I was reading up a bit about that last night. It's really interesting, because what they're saying is that, like, this cross grew from was made from 3 trees that had been, had some history in Christianity for thousands and thousands of years. But somehow or other they managed to get this cross that Christ was part of, a piece of this cross that Christ was crucified on, and they fashioned it into, they covered it in gold and stuff like that, and made this big golden cross. And then before the battle, we see how Baldwin, he actually submitted himself before the cross, and he was offering prayers in front of the cross. So he had great devotion for God. Even though we see that their faith is obviously somewhat different from Vaishnavism, still faith is there. And you see in so many people in the world, this deep faith is there. They have deep faith in God. I mean, maybe it's a bit confused in terms of how to worship God and things like that, but still, faith is there. And it's the natural characteristic of a human being to want to worship God, or to worship God. But because of the influence of the age we live in, people are bewildered about what is their duty. They're bewildered about what their duty is and how to manifest that duty. Now they're thinking their duty is to pursue sense gratification, to become the controller and the enjoyer, because they're bewildered. But we see that Prabhupada quotes this aphorism sometimes, Asango hi ayam purusha, how the jiva cannot become affected by matter because the jiva is transcendental. Something that's transcendental cannot be contacted by matter, not possible. So because there's asango hi ayam purusha, the jiva, because it's asango, it cannot associate with matter. It's not, we're encased by it, and because of our foolishness we identify with it. We think that this is us, but it's just our misidentification with this external nature. But the jiva cannot be actually affected by that. Not possible. Even though it seems like we're completely covered by it. It's just illusory because of our misidentification. And so what happens is when the jiva comes into contact with transcendental knowledge or the transcendental process of spiritual life, then very quickly, and Prabhupada makes this point, that very quickly the jiva comes back to this original state. And this is why it's so important that we engage in propagating Krishna consciousness, because we find that when people, I'm sure you've all had this experience when you speak to people and something clicks, something kind of resonates with them, and then they come to this point of wanting to be a devotee of Krishna. That happens very quickly. And the transformation from the point of being not a devotee to the point of wanting to be a devotee is phenomenal. It happens so fast. And sometimes the transformation is so amazing, the difference you see between what they were before and what they are now. And this is why, we have coming up now here in Melbourne the Christmas marathon or the book marathon. There's a very, very important time in our annual calendar, because it's a time when we can, make extra efforts to reach out to people and to try to give them Krishna consciousness and try to revitalize this original state of every living entity, to be a servant of God. Because that's what this Krishna consciousness movement is for. It's for spreading Krishna consciousness, for bringing others back to their original consciousness. And by doing that, as Krishna says at the end of the Gita, that there's no person in this world who's more dear to me than that person who's spreading this message of Krishna consciousness. He says this to Arjuna. So this is how we become very dear to Krishna, is by telling others about Krishna. So this Krishna consciousness movement gives us so many wonderful opportunities. And Lord Chaitanya says, Yare deke tahe kara Krishna upadesha maragai guru harate desh. Whomever you meet, you instruct them in this science of Krishna as it's given in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, and in this way, on my order, become guru and deliver the people of this land. So whenever you have an opportunity, whomever you meet, you just give them, in whatever way you can, Krishna consciousness. My wife has these little potpourri bags she makes up. She carries around, she always has some with her. So whenever she has an opportunity, she puts tulsi leaf in there and Nrsimha oil. So whenever she has a chance, she'll give people these potpourri bags. And it's just one way of giving Krishna consciousness. You see in Cholpati, most of the devotees, when they go out, they have these bags of Mahaprasad. And so whenever they have a chance, they give Mahaprasad. I remember I was recently in London. I was on my way to Scotland. I had a whole box of sweets I was taking them for the devotees in Scotland. And there was this young woman. She probably was in her late 20s or 30s, outside the train station in a very desperate situation. She obviously poor, didn't have a place to stay, and she's begging. And she looked very kind of downtrodden, if you like. She didn't look like she was in a very good situation. It looked like she'd been crying. And so I walked past her, and so something just said, no, I have to do something here. And so I opened the box up, and I got some pera out, and I gave her a piece of pera. And then I walked away, and I said, this is a sweet, it's very nice, it'll be good for you. And so then I walked off, and I looked back, and she's eating the sweet. I thought, great, back to Godhead. You eat Mahaprasadam from the deities, your life material life is over. So at some point in this life, next life, she'll take to Krishna consciousness in some way or another. She'll get the chance to take Mahaprasad again, and then from that it'll build up, build up, build up. And Prabhupada explains, it's just like, every day you put aside $1, $1, $1, $1. Yeah? And when you have $100, you can start a business. So it's like that. When we need to keep reaching out. And every time we have the opportunity, try to give people some element of Krishna consciousness. And it builds up in their spiritual bank account, and they get to the point where they can actually start to practice Krishna consciousness, and then their life is guaranteed back home to Godhead at some point. And so this Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada said, it will save this world in its darkest hour. So it's up to us as the members of this Krishna consciousness movement to take up the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in whatever way we can, and spread Krishna consciousness in whatever way we can, and save as many people as we can, and make sure that as many people as we can go back to Godhead. And this is the mission of this movement. Okay. Any questions at all? Any comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice class. Prabhu, you were just, at the end of the class, you were just talking about the importance of Mahaprasad, that if you just have it, your material life is over. About Mahaprasadam, how the deity's Mahaprasadam is so valuable that once we have it, our material life is over. So my question is, sometimes talking about myself, after eating Mahaprasad every day, getting honored to eat it, sometimes we take it for granted, and the consciousness while we're honoring that Mahaprasad might be different, like we're running somewhere or something else.
Yeah.
So how can, instead of taking it for granted, how can we honor it as equal to the Lord?
It's quite a common thing that familiarity breeds contempt. And this is something, I see in my service in training devotees in deity worship. We need to always be conscious of who we are and what's our position. Gopi Bhata Pada Kamaloi, Dasa Dasa Anudasa. And we need to reinforce that awareness constantly. Just like it's quite common, in the scriptures it mentions that before you go on the altar you should offer obeisances to the deities. You should bow down before the deities. It's actually the first thing we do when we come out into the temple. We ring the bell. Probably his great position and my insignificant position. But because of this familiarity, we become proud. Even though it's a little bit proud, we still become proud and we think we're greater than what we are. We need to regularly meditate upon the fact that everything I have, everything I do, comes from Krishna, is because of Krishna. Every capacity I have in life is by His mercy. The fact that I can breathe, the fact that I can see, the fact that I can eat and digest, this is all by His mercy. Without Krishna's mercy, I cannot function. And so, when we're doing service for the deity, before we enter the altar, we should always, men should offer full obeisances, ladies should do what they call panchanga pranam. We should always bow down before the Lord, submitting myself at His lotus feet, understanding that I am His servant. So it's the same when we have Mahaprasadam. We should see this as a great blessing from Krishna, that I actually get the opportunity to take His remnants. Because when you honor Mahaprasadam, you are eating Krishna in a food form. You're coming into contact with Krishna in a food form. So you eat Mahaprasadam. This is non-different from Krishna because it's mixed with His saliva. He's tasted. This is directly from Krishna's plate. And how many living entities there are in this world who don't get that opportunity to eat Mahaprasadam? Mahaprasade Govinde Namo Brahmani Vaishnave Swalpa Punya Vatam Brajan Vishvasa Navijayate. This Mahaprasadam is the food remnants of Krishna, Govinda. And even just by performing a Swalpa Punya Vatam Brajan, if one has a little bit of piety, we get this opportunity to honor Krishna's remnants. And so always try to be reflective on what it is we have, the good fortune we have. And if we're always, reflecting like this, and then you'll find that it's much easier to maintain the proper consciousness and not take it for granted. Yeah. Because right now we have, like here in Melbourne, for instance, we have a nice situation. There's plenty of Mahaprasadam, there's beautiful deities, there's lots of nice devotees. But that may not always be there. So we should always respect, that there's different things, the devotees. Always appreciate the association of devotees. And like sometimes we go, the devotees like this, devotees like this. Sometimes we complain, because of familiarity. But what if we didn't have the association of devotees? What if all we had to associate were non-devotees? The only people we had to associate with were non-devotees. It's a very different environment. And so the association of devotees is a very, very rare thing. So we need to, again, remind ourselves regularly, even though we may have disagreements with devotees, we may have upsets with devotees, whatever, always be aware that devotees are very dear to Krishna. And by respecting devotees, we're respecting Krishna. If we disrespect devotees, we disrespect Krishna. Even sometimes we rationalize, but they're not very advanced devotees. I only have to respect the advanced devotees. And we see that. Commonly we see that. It's like if you have like a senior Vaishnava sitting here giving class, there'll be so many people in the temple room. But then when someone else is giving class, not many. So we discriminate like that. But we should respect all Vaishnavas. Respect all things that are connected with Krishna. Respect the Shastra. We don't put the Shastra on the floor. We keep it on a table. Sacred things. When there's flowers offered to the deities, we respect the flowers because it's the deities' Mahaprasad remnants. So it's just a matter of it's good to understand what it is we're dealing with, to reflect on the nature, the transcendental nature of these things and how they're non-different from Krishna. And with that in mind, then remind ourselves regularly of what it is we're dealing with. This is Krishna's Mahaprasad remnants. This is Krishna's devotees. These are Krishna's literatures about Krishna, etc., etc. And actually, in the deity room, for instance, as described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how everything that is engaged in serving Krishna is actually a direct expansion of Balaram. Because Balaram, he's the Supreme Personality of Servant of Godhead. So he expands himself in so many ways, the deities. The umbrella over the deities, the shoes of the deities, the clothes of the deities, the paraphernalia we use for worshipping the deity, his seat. Everything we're using for worshiping the deities is actually an expansion of Balaram. So then the asana he sits on, we don't step over it, we don't touch it with our feet. So it's really good to learn the transcendental nature of everything and then to regularly reflect on that. Very important. And in this way, we will develop deeper and deeper respect for all of these things. Okay, thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivedanta ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.